Hi, I'm Reba. Welcome to my channel. Today we'll talk about a German folklore about the fisherman and his wife. Once upon a time, there was a fisherman who lived with his wife in a small piss pot near the sea. Every single day, he would set out to the sea to catch some fish, but he barely made enough for him and his wife to eat. One day, he was out on his boat a little further into the sea, away from his usual spot, with his fishing line dropping deep into the water. He was lost in thought, gazing intently into the distance, when suddenly he felt a huge tug on his fishing line. When the fisherman reeled in his cord, he found a huge fish, a flounder, at the end of his line. To his utter shock and amazement, the fish began to talk. The fish pleaded with the fisherman to let him go. He said, "Please let me go. I beg of you to spare my life. I am not an ordinary fish. I'm actually an enchanted prince. I'm currently under a spell, and that is why I've taken this particular form. I'm of no use to you. I'm not even good to taste, so please let me go." The fisherman said, "Otherwise also I was going to let you go. Of what use is a talking fish to me?" Saying this, he released the fish into the sea, and the fish completely disappeared into the water. The fisherman went back to his home and told his wife about the talking fish. Upon hearing the story, the wife seemed very disappointed with her husband and said, "If it was an enchanted prince, then why didn't you ask for a wish to be granted?" Now the husband became confused. He said, "What kind of wish am I supposed to ask a fish?" Then she said, "Can't you see the dire poverty that we are living in? You should have asked the fish for a decent hut to live in." Now upon hearing this, the husband said, "I don't think this is the right thing to do." But upon the insistence of his wife, he went back to the sea. He went back to the very spot where he had caught the fish, and he called out to the fish. The fisherman said aloud, "Flounder, flounder in the sea, if you're a man, then speak to me. Though I don't agree with my wife's request, I've come to ask it nonetheless." The fish suddenly appeared and said, "Well, what does she want?" The fisherman said, "My wife wants to live in a decent hut." The fish said, "Go home, she has already got it." The fisherman went back home, and to his surprise, he found his wife happily waiting for him at the door of their brand new hut. She said, "Dear husband, please take a look inside our brand new hut. Isn't this much better than that piss pot that we were living in?" He took a look around, and to his surprise, he found they had a whole new kitchen, a stove, a backyard with a kitchen garden and all kinds of vegetables growing in it. They also had a couple of hens, dogs, and chickens and ducks. Now all of this heavily pleased him, and he said to his wife, "Look at us, now we can finally enjoy our life." For about a week or two, everything was going very fine and smoothly, but then the wife became very dissatisfied. She complained to her husband, "I feel our hut is too cramped, and the kitchen garden is too small. Go back to the fish and say that this time I want a castle." The fisherman grew very tense. He told his wife, "Listen, we've just received a brand new hut from that fish. I'm not going to go back to him and request him for a castle. He will not be willing to do anything for us." To this the wife said, "Can you hear yourself talking? He will be more than willing to do it. He can easily do it. In fact, he'll be very happy to do it for you. Go back to the fish and request for a castle this time." Unwilling, with a very heavy heart, the fisherman set out to the sea. That particular day, the water was extremely dark, dense, and very calm. He called out to the fish appeared, and the fisherman related his plight to the fish. Upon hearing this, the fish said, "Go back home, your wife is standing at the door of your castle." And indeed, when the fisherman reached the home, he found that his wife was standing at the door of a very beautiful palace. She said, "My dear husband, please take a look at our beautiful castle." The husband went inside the castle, and he found that everything, the tables, the chairs, the entire furniture, were made of gold. There were a plethora of servants who were doing all kinds of work inside the castle. In the backyard of the castle were acres and acres of pastures and land filled with deers and does and rabbits. Indeed, the castle was extremely comforting. The fisherman told his wife, "Let us live in this beautiful castle and be content with our life." The next morning, however, the wife woke up with a very sour mood. She looked at her husband, who was sleeping soundly and snoring, poked at him in his ribs and said, "Wake up. We must become king. We have to rule this country." The husband, who was still half sleeping, drowsily rubbed his eyes and said, "Why should we become king? I don't want to become a king." The wife said, "Well then, I want to become a king. Go to the fish and say that your wife wants to become a king." With a very heavy heart, the fisherman went back to the fish, told him everything. The fish said, "Go home. Your wife is already king." When the fisherman went home, he saw there was an even bigger castle this time with a lot of soldiers, drums and trumpets. He saw his wife sitting on a throne inside a very large hall, and the throne was made of gold and diamonds. His wife was wearing a huge crown, even bigger than her head, which was made entirely with gold and encrusted with precious jewels. He told his wife, "Now that you're king, at least now let us be satisfied with our lives." But then she looked at her husband and said, "I am not at all happy being the king. I want to become an emperor. I have too much time on my hands. Go tell the fish that now I want to become an emperor." The fisherman said, "No, I am not going back to the fish this time. This is too much. He is himself a prince. He made you a king, but he will never make you an emperor. I am not going to go back to that fish." The wife looked at him haughtily and said, "I am the king. You have to obey me. I command you to go to the fish and say that your wife now wants to become the emperor." The fisherman went to the fish. The fish said, "Go home. She is already the emperor." The fisherman went home and saw that his wife was sitting on a very high throne which was made from a single block of gold. She was wearing a crown that was 3 yards tall, and on both sides she was flanked by soldiers, and in front of her there were many princes and dukes who were bowing down to her. He went up to his wife and said, "Now that you have become the emperor, I hope you are satisfied, my dear wife." But his wife looked at him very crossly and said, "I am not at all happy. The Pope has authority over the emperor. Go and tell that fish that now I want to become the Pope." The fisherman, with his knees trembling and hands shivering, he went to the fish and said, "My wife wants to become the Pope." The fish said, "Go home. She has already become the Pope." When the fisherman reached home, he saw his wife was sitting on a throne which was 2 miles high. She was flanked by bishops and priests, and there were rows and rows of candles in front of her. He told his wife, "My dear wife, now that you've become the Pope, there is no one greater than the Pope. Let us be happy with our life." The wife looked at him sarcastically and said, "Let me think about it." That particular night, when the husband was sleeping soundly, his wife tossed and turned in her bed. She was not content with being the Pope. She wanted to become even greater and even bigger than the Pope himself. The night turned into day, and the wife was sitting by the windowsill, watching the sun slowly climb up the sky. Suddenly an idea struck her mind. She turned to her husband, poked at him and said, "Go to the fish and say that I want to become God." The fisherman was so horrified at what he had just heard. He fell down the bed, looked at her and stared at her. "What? God? Please be content with being the Pope. The fish cannot turn you into God." The woman said, "I will never have peace of mind until I can dictate the movements of the sun and the moon. Go and tell the fish that I want to become God." The fisherman went to the fish. The fish said, "Oh, now she wants to become God. Go home. She is back in her piss pot again." The fisherman and his wife, till the very end of their life, lived in poverty in the same old piss pot. Although the story gives a very simple moral lesson that one should not be greedy in life, one should be content with whatever one has in life. But in psychology, there is a much greater relevance and a much deeper significance when it comes to this particular story. According to psychology, people who blindly pursue power and dominance and control are in fact trying to compensate for whatever childhood trauma they have undergone. They have deep-seated insecurities, deep-rooted inferiority complex, and that is why they feel if they were to sit in a position of power and authority, they will not be vulnerable to further abuse in their life. They want to assume control so that nobody else can assume control over them. It can also stem from feelings of inferiority complex, where a person feels that by pursuing superiority, they will somehow compensate for their feelings of inadequacy. Relentless pursuit of power is something that is never ending. No matter what position you hold, you will never be satisfied with life because you're constantly pursuing power and control outside of yourself. The day you realize that the locus of control is not outside of you but inside of you, when you turn the quest for power not outside of yourself but inside of yourself, that is when you'll be truly healed from this particular complex. In order to know more about locus of control, please don't forget to watch the video on my primary channel, Reba E. Thank you so much for watching. Take care.